There has been a shift in North America, and African countries should wake up. The moment of total resistance has come. If condescending behavior and paternalistic approach is a foreign policy, then resistance should be a duty for the continent of Africa. Africa should expect the future United States of America's administration to not be of their interest. The same way that the continent has resisted the current administration, so be it for the future administration, because the U.S. is focused on its own interest, and Donald Trump, with his condescending behavior, will not change. He has demonstrated that over and over, and that's the reason why the continent of Africa, from east, west, south, and also north, should stand firm and tell the United States of America that it will not be business as usual 80 years ago. These characteristics that is going to cloud the United States of America should not be embraced by the continent of Africa. No country, no strategic partner in the region should review or embrace the future administration. They should approach them with a grain of salt. The African continent should review its relationship with Europe, review its relationship with Asian nation countries, including China and also the country of Russia and other Middle Eastern partners. But more importantly, Africa should continue to engage those partners that come in a win-win situation. The wind of change is here. African nations should push back to the future U.S. administration the same way they have done for the current administration. We are going to talk about a number of things here. Smash the like button because we have enough to cover.
And certain African countries who were until recently protected from deportation reportedly prompted the president to question, why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here? He then suggested that the United States should instead bring more people from countries like Norway.
That's the racist element. Norwegians are white. They're Northern Europeans. He was referring earlier in his vulgar comment to Africans and Haitians who are mostly of African descent. These are racist comments. He said things like this before when he talked about Nigerians who won't go back to live in huts, and he talked about Haitians who bring AIDS to the United States. These are all confirmations of what a lot of people have long suspected, that he harbors racism.
Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. I know it's been a couple of days. We've been observing the current geopolitical shift in North America. This video will focus on the reason why the continent of Africa should resist the future United States of America administration like they have done in the current administration. The future U.S. president has a demeaning attitude and also a condescending approach, and the way he looks at the continent of Africa. Like I've always said, Africa is not in the interest of the United States geopolitical circles, and that will not change for the U.S. administration that will come in January. African countries must wake up. Things have changed. The geopolitical circles are changing so fast. Donald Trump, from his attitude and his own perspective as a U.S. president, will cause a lot of chaos and also a lot of challenges in the continent of Africa. So what should African governments do? African governments must go back to their strategic board and review the relationship. Make sure that they stood firm on every aspect, from collaboration, cooperation, developmental issue, investment. The United States of America's future administration will not overnight change to work on your own interests. And what do you need to do? You must make sure that you review all your strategic partners. Let's go back to a few years ago. This same man, Donald Trump, called African countries shithole. And Donald Trump does not respect immigrations from those third world countries. To his own word,
they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
It's not the first time the president has spoken disparagingly of immigrants, and his spokesperson didn't deny the comments. Certain Washington politicians choose to fight for foreign countries. President Trump will always fight for the American people, he said. President Trump is fighting for permanent solutions that make our country stronger by welcoming those who can contribute to our society, grow our economy, and assimilate into our great nation.
This condescending behavior, we saw it in the United States of America's campaign, where he actually came lashing out to show the true colors of the United States of America.
Sir, do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So
I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black woman.
I
She went to a
respect
historically
either
black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir.
This is the fact. Don't expect things to change. Instead, the United States of America's approach to the continent of Africa should be that of pretend that they will try to collaborate. But I assure you, the countries in West Africa, East Africa, where U.S. has strategic interests, should review that collaboration with the United States. They should go back and focus on their own interests. Donald Trump's international or foreign policy credentials is below par if we compare it with previous administration. I'm not saying that the current administration has done some strategic relationship. I'm saying that the United States geopolitical circles have no African interest in mind. Let's go back to a few other things to talk about here. First, if you look at Donald Trump's global perspective, he does not feature Africa as a continent that can can benefit the United States. Let me put it in that way. It's important for African governments to understand that the pushback they received during the previous administration of the United States of America under Donald Trump will be doubled this time around. The president of the United States of America, the future president Donald Trump, has already shown Africans who he is. He's not going to change. And what should Africans do? Embrace him? You can embrace a man who look at a particular race of people as demeaning in terms of his approach. The bottom line I'm talking about here, African countries and governments must stand firm on every aspect that they collaborate with the United States of America. They should review every source of their relationship with a grain of salt. It is important. These are strategic times in the continent of Africa. The United States of America administration will change. The foreign policy will change. The foreign policy officials will change. Now, where the conversation has been led, it's important to understand this relationship.
President Trump, as a leader of an important country like the United States, it is important for you not to disrespect or show any disrespect to any country in the world. We want the United States to engage with the world, with other countries, with due regard, with respect, particularly Africa. Africa is the origins of humanity, and you must therefore respect your origins. President Trump's origins and his roots are in Africa.
African nations must focus on their own interests. The U.S. administration that's coming in January will not have your interest in mind. So what you need to do, resist them in all aspects and let them not lecture you. Don't accept the United States of America to lecture you on democracy and telling you how to run campaigns and how to do things, because the U.S. has demonstrated that it has one arm of its behavior and it can show you the other when it wants. And that's what we've seen. Donald Trump is not going to change things overnight. And the African government should not expect things to change from there. The policy of the African countries should be that of resistance, should be that of lack of collaboration, should be that of a slow pace to let the United States of America know that the geopolitical environment has changed. African countries to focus on their relationship with other emerging power, looking at the Middle East, looking at also Russia, China, and also India. These are the countries that African countries should engage to an extent against European Union. The Donald Trump's coming to power is sending shockwaves across other countries and strategic partners. Look at what's happening in the Sudan. Look at what's happening between Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and also Rwanda. You think that conflict will be resolved? Look at the Sahelian issue, which is going on. Do you think that all of a sudden those countries will be taken out of the sanction list? That's not going to happen. Look at the problem in the Sahara region, where you have Morocco, Algeria, and including the Sahrawi people. What did Donald Trump do when he came to power? He recognized Morocco's sovereignty over that particular territory. This is disastrous, and it caused a lot of issues in the continent of Africa. and South Africa stood up to the government of the United States of America at the time, and that caused a lot of frictions in terms of their bilateral trade and collaboration.
The deal reached makes the US the only Western country to recognize Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara. The White House proclamation says an independent Sahrawi state is not a realistic option for resolving the conflict, and that genuine autonomy under Moroccan sovereignty is the only feasible solution, urging the parties to engage in discussions without delay. The UN was pressed on the Secretary General's reaction.
He remains convinced that a solution to the question of Western Sahara is possible, and that's in accordance with relevant Security Council resolutions 2440, 2548, to name two.
As part of the deal, Israel and Morocco would also restore diplomatic and other relations, immediately opening liaison offices in both capitals that would eventually lead to embassies. The United Nations Security Council established in 1991 the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, which at the time paved the way for a ceasefire between Morocco and the Polisario Front, which has for decades sought independence for the region through the council-mandated referendum, which has never taken place.
We have always had on the table the possibility of taking up arms and using all other legitimate means to attain our rights. We have agreed to the ceasefire in exchange of a referendum. The referendum is not there, so the Sahrawis and the Polisario leadership will definitely take the appropriate decisions.
Polisario says the US brokered deal will not change an inch of the reality of the ongoing conflict and the right of the people of Western Sahara to self-determination. South Africa, for its part, has been a fierce critic of the lack of progress in the Security Council on this file. Sherman Briceby's SABC News, New York.
A number of African countries came under threat. Rwanda was taken off the AGOA list. Why was Rwanda taken out from the AGOA list? Because it resisted the U.S. hegemonic trade policies that it brought to the continent of Africa. Rwanda was one of those countries that suffered from the dumping of the United States trade policy regarding second-hand clothing that was brought into the country. Rwanda wanted to manage the relationship in a collaborative way, but the U.S. imposed that during Donald Trump's time, when the country of Benin and also a number of other countries in the French-speaking region wanted to also resist U.S. poultry import. But what happened? Donald Trump crushed those countries. Donald Trump pressured South African government in accepting the policy of the poultry that was at the time. So this particular administration will come in with some heartbreaking policy. So African governments should really step back a little bit and see how they can kind of resist the U.S. future administration. It's important. Let's look at other very important things here to consider Donald Trump's foreign policy behavior. Donald Trump does not understand what foreign policy is all about. And like he has said, he wants to make America great again, not the world or Africa great again. So African governments should wake up and resist the U.S. future administration the same way they have resisted the current administration. At the United Nations, African governments should come closer and work together and continue to insist that they want to have a voting power at the United Nations Security Council. Do you think that Donald Trump will support any of those policies? Do you think that Donald Trump recognizes any African country to play in an equal league together? Do you remember what Donald Trump did to Nigeria when he banned all travels coming from Nigerian countries? He came up with his own list of hegemonic list, I will put it in that way, to crush down a number of countries in the continent of Africa in terms of their travel to the United States. This man has no respect for people of that continent. And do you think that things will change? They showed you a preview of his behavior. And now that this man is coming back to power, that foreign policy will trickle down. There is a conflict in Ukraine going on at the moment. The United States of America has a number of issues that will bog them down. Look at what's happening in the South China Sea, within China and Taiwan. The conflict is brewing there. Look at Sudan. Do you think the U.S. will focus on that? Look at Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, like I've pointed out. Look at the trade wars between China and the United States of America. Do you think Donald Trump will focus on youth and Africa, there will be strong problems going on between NATO and the United States of America. If you remember when Donald Trump was in power at the time, he came up really strongly to engage NATO countries. That caused a lot of frictions between Europe and the United States of America. Now you will start seeing countries like, for example, France, who want to step up their game to lead Europe's security. Germany, who want to step up its game to see how they can protect their own continent. And what will Africa do? Sit back? Africa cannot sit back at this time. African continent must refocus its strategy. These are critical times in the continent of Africa's history. The current geopolitical shift that has happened in the US will trickle down in a negative way in the continent of Africa.
America's allies and enemies alike are reacting to Donald Trump's return to the world stage. The president-elect getting congratulatory calls from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Ukraine's president, the Chinese president. Welcome back to Election Night in America continued. I want to go to CNN's Fareed Zakaria to talk about the world reacting. Fareed, what has been standing out to you in terms of what we've seen over the last 24 hours?
Well, it was what you could expect. Everyone is racing to congratulate Trump. But in general, when you look at the surround, I'd say Europe is depressed. The Gulf states, the rich Gulf states in the Middle East are elated. China is anxious. India is happy, pleased. And Russia is probably rejoicing. So it's a mixture of reactions because each one is trying to gauge what this means for them. But the broader question I think everyone is asking themselves is the United States in this new dispensation, is the United States going to be out for just itself? Or does Trump see America as the leader of the free world? Does he see America as the force that helps create a certain kind of international order, not simply every nation narrowly pursuing its own interests, the dictators doing well when they can, other countries doing well when they can, but a world based on, a certain degree of openness, freedom, liberty, rules. That has been America's historic role since 1945. And what they're trying to get a sense of is, are we in a new era completely? Has the post-1945 American-led international system finally begun to see, the twilight of its existence?
And African governments must resist the future U.S. administration until, I'm not talking about resistance here, I'm talking about the economic policy, the investment strategy, the collaboration, the human resource arrangement, and more importantly, the AGOA need to be reviewed carefully. It is important to understand that Africa is not what it used to be before. So Donald Trump will not come in and make things work for the continent. If you sit back in the continent and hoping that Donald Trump is going to come into power and work for your own interests, then you are stupid. You have to understand that this man has no respect for the African people. He has no respect for African governments. He showed that pretty clear when he invited the president of Nigeria, then the former president of Nigeria, who came to the United States of America, and in a press briefing, he was talking trash on how he's looking on how to collaborate with Nigeria.
U.S. President Donald Trump called for a closer trade and security relationship with Nigeria as he met that country's President Muhammadu Buhari at the White House on Monday. Buhari is the first sub-Saharan African leader that Trump has hosted. VOA's Bill Gallo has more.
President Donald Trump attempting to reset his relationship with Africa as he hosted Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari.
We have many things that we do together, as you know. Probably, especially on terrorism.
Both leaders downplaying the controversy over Trump's reported vulgar comments about African countries in January, with Buhari saying he wasn't interested in discussing it.
I'm not sure about, the validity or whether that allegation against the president was true or not. So the best thing for me is to keep quiet.
But although the two leaders glossed over the controversy, some think it could have long-term impacts.
I think Nigerians will not forget those sorts of comments, but I think they're also eager to move forward and to get back to some kind of relationship with the United States, which is mutually beneficial and mutually productive.
On Monday, Buhari and Trump focused on mutual interests, such as weapons sales.
We love helicopters. He likes them more than I do.
Trump referring to his decision to approve a $600 million military sales deal to Nigeria. Nigeria uses the equipment to fight Boko Haram.
What has Nigeria benefited from the United States of America? Nigeria appears to be a puppet of the U.S. It's important that countries like South Africa, despite the little flaws they have proven to the United States of America that the hegemonic policies don't work. If you look at the current situation happening between Russia and the collaborations with the country of South Africa, and how the BRICS countries have moved ahead to engage other strategic countries in the continent of Africa, the United States of America is not so happy with that. And look at how China has invested in the continent of Africa. Do you think that the United States of America has the interest of the African people? Look at the number of investment that China has done in the continent of Africa. From East Africa, the Standard Gauge Railway, you will go ahead and talk about bridges, road, canal, vans, airports, and number of railroads across the continent of Africa. The policymakers from those countries will question this particular thing, talking about debt trap. It's okay. Africa does not need geopolitical talking or talking about democracy when you cannot invest. Look at the Lobito corridor. I tell you what, the Lobito corridor is dead. You're not going to hear anything concerning the Lobito corridor. And the current administration that struggled to an extent to basically push this particular relationship. You will not hear anything about Lobito corridor. Let's give it 4 years and look at the projects in the continent of Africa. If something is going to change, nothing will change. What am I saying here? I'm simply saying that the new administration coming in January will not have Africa's interest in mind. You guys in the continent should re-strategize your relationship. If it is possible, come out to make it clear that the U.S. should come out with a clear policy in the region. Because first of all, the U.S. does not have any policy in the region. The U.S. hegemonic approach in the continent will continue, if not being suppressed more, if Donald Trump comes to power, which is what we have seen. If you observe the United States of America's election, you will get to understand that the U.S. don't give a damn with what happens in other regions around the world. If the previous administration was basically to an extent trying to flex its muscles in some regions, which has created a lot of conflicts across the globe, the future administration will make it worse. It will instead worsen things in the continent of Africa. And what should Africans do? Africans should fight for their own interests. The continent of African individuals and geopolitical experts in the region and policymakers should engage partners that have win-win aspect in terms of their development, their investment, their growth, their collaboration, scientific relationship, and more importantly, total economic growth. Those are the things that are important. Donald Trump will not, in 4 years, visit Africa like the current president, Joe Biden, that promised that he was going to travel to the continent of Africa to visit. The only time Joe Biden went to the continent of Africa is when he went to the COP event in Egypt. So don't expect Donald Trump to come to the continent of Africa. The last U.S. president to visit the continent of Africa in an official visit was Barack Obama. Listen, folks, things have changed. The landscape in the geopolitical circle has evolved. And where does Africans sit? Sit there and be waiting for the United States to change things for you. It's not going to work. Europe at the moment is re-strategizing its relationship with the United States of America. Asian countries are re-strategizing the relationship with the United States of America. Middle Eastern countries are refocusing their strategy with the United States of America. And what should Africa do? Sit there and watch? Don't sit and watch, because what's coming in 2025 will be huge. Donald Trump will come in to crush those countries and those particular strategic partners whom do not, according to him, respect or be loyal to the United States. Africa will not be loyal to the United States. That's not going to happen. This man is one of those leaders that needs to be observed very closely. If you hear a former U.S. official that worked very closely with this man, is telling you how this man thinks, how he behaves, how he sees things around the world, then you African governments will embrace Donald Trump. I think that would be stupid of you. You have to approach Donald Trump with an arm's length Take your gap. Don't give him an embrace. Send a handshake and talk to him in a way that you will give him that impression that there are a number of things that you don't know about this man. So be careful. The United States will change its foreign policy. The U.S. will change its military policy. The United States will change its economic policy. All of these things are going to change, and it will impact the continent of Africa. We have 4 years coming in January to see a monumental shift in U.S.-African relationship. This is important for African people to note that this United States of America you talk about does not have your interest in mind. The United States Congress and the Senate at the moment, that will be won according to projected results by the current Republican Party, will come in to work on the interest of Donald Trump. It's important that the current military base that was in Agadez was dismantled, because you just believe that Donald Trump have in his head that every aspect is going to be bomb, bomb, bomb. Countries in the Middle East, like Iran, want to resist the United States of America. Other countries across the region. And why should Africa embrace the United States future policy or future president? The same way Africa has resisted Joe Biden's administration, Africans should push back big time away from this hegemonic United States current policy and the worst future policy that will come to the continent of Africa. African governments need to work out a plan to engage this administration in an aspect that it will be clear that African nations have understood that they're not going to come Hail Mary from the United States of America. Donald Trump has no foreign policy credentials. So to point out, Donald Trump from Europe, his behavior, European countries, I'm sure, from Eastern Europe to Western Europe and other very important countries, that they feel that the relationship is in jeopardy with the country of the United States of America. African governments must go back to the drawing board to tell Donald Trump's future administration or the United States future administration that it will not be business as usual. Let's go back to look at the chaotic relationship that African countries had. I remember there was a video when the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, came out strong, was screaming and shouting to Donald Trump that you cannot disrespect the continent of Africa. You cannot disrespect the African people. You wasting your time. The moment has come. That particular disrespect will double from what we have seen. So what should Africans do? Sit back and watch? No. Africa's strategic partners must be those that come in with win-win situation. Africa should continue to engage China and collaborate with China. Don't expect that the policy will change. The United States relationship with Russia is not going to change. Russia's relationship with Africa should stood firm. She stood firm because that country has proven and shown some number of countries in the continent of Africa that it does have their interests in mind. China has invested hugely. The continent of Africa should engage the African or the European continent with a grain of salt. This is important. There will be trade wars. There will be high tariffs from a number of areas. You've heard that there will be deportation, a number of deportation from the United States. It's important. He is mentioned clearly. The first day he comes to power, he will round up. I really want to see how over 11 million people should be rounded up within 4 years. That will be brilliant. It will be wonderful to see how a president comes to power. And if the U.S. economy shakes, that will cause devastation in other geopolitical environments around the world. So the continent of Africa must resist Donald Trump with every iota of his foreign policy. The continent of Africa should rethink a relationship with the United States of America. These are challenging times for the continent of Africa. That's why I made this video, to call the attention of Africa's geopolitical experts that the wind of change has come to the United States of America, and Africa should wake up and stand up strong to prepare for the battle ahead, because the next 4 years will be full of drama and a number of very important things. That's the reason why the continent of Africa has risen and is asking questions at the United Nations. Let's see what happens. The current U.S. president supported that Africa should have veto powers to an extent, and that they should have a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council, the Big Five, where the current Turkish president said that the world is bigger than five. That's true. Let's see. Joe Biden, to an extent, pushed, supported that particular idea. Let's see what Donald Trump will say. And it's important. There are a number of bilateral trade and relationship between the continent of Africa and the United States of America. Let's see how that will play. Let's review the U.S. investment in Africa for the next 4 years and compare what it was a couple of years ago. It is important that Africa understands that the shift in the power of the United States will not be of Africa's interest. We want to thank you for watching. Let us know what you think in regards to the current U.S. administration failures in the continent of Africa and what you expect the future administration that demonstrated a number of failures. And this will be the second time. And we don't know if they will be called again the shithole countries, like Donald Trump himself said that. If a whole leader of the most powerful country in the world will use such nasty approach in describing regions around the world, it tells you his condescending behavior will not be welcome in the continent of Africa. We want to thank you for watching. Let us know what you think in regards to the current geopolitical environment and where Africa and what Africa should be doing to resist the United States of America. We want to thank you for watching. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think in regards to this particular important period in African history. We are looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.